Hello everyone, welcome to Better Tech. So today we have Fawad with us. Fawad, welcome to Better Tech.
Hey, it's great to be here. So thanks for having me.
So first of all, Fawad, we will start with your quick introduction. Maybe if you can give us a brief overview of your career highlights, how you have been doing, and all these things.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. My name is Fawad Shaikh. I was born in Pakistan. I'm now living in America since I was a child. And currently, I am the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Candle. Really, my whole career, I've been focused on software companies, tech companies, startup companies. And, it felt like it was time for me to try my hand at my own startup. And here we are, and I think that a lot of the things that we're working on are becoming just so much more relevant in today's societies than even just a year ago when I started working on it.
Sure. So Fawad, you have worked at various corporations before doing your startup, or you have been like a startup person since the very beginning?
Yeah, no, so this is my first personal startup. I've worked at a lot of other people's startups for pretty much my whole career. I started off actually as not in a startup, and that's what told me that I need to go to startups. Is I started at a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers. They're a
Mm-hmm.
massive consulting and accounting firm, and that's where I started. And I realized that that is not what I want in the place I work, is where I'm basically just a number and it's massive. I like to have a lot more influence in what I'm doing, a lot more visibility, and just the type of person I am. I love being just down in the weeds, being able to change from, helping with a customer one day to just being and helping just purely something back end or internal completely the next day. And startups really give you that full flavor of all different aspects of a business.
Sure. So your latest startup, which you talk about, Candle, which domain it is operating?
So Candle is in the software development uh, enhancement domain. It's really a new field. We see a lot of developer tool technologies come, and that's really where Candle lies. And so it's our goal is really to help make software development easier. Over the
Mm,
past few years, and really over the past 20 years, we're seeing this evolution that software development is just becoming more and more complex. There's more frameworks added every day, and it's not just acceptable to just know, I'll use JavaScript, for example, right? You have to know React, right? And you have to be an
mm-hmm.
expert in React, which is just one of the frameworks. And
Mm,
that, while it may be a transferable skill to other companies who just know React, it's not a transferable skill in general. There's many companies
mm-hmm.
out there who don't have React at all in their stack. They perhaps have, Vue or Svelte or
Angular, yeah.
Angular, absolutely. And so when you go in, you go, oh, I'm learning React, this is great. And then now you're limited to just being a React specialist, because companies now are like, well, it doesn't matter if you know JavaScript. We really want somebody who is an expert in React. And
Mm-hmm.
so we really are moving away from kind of, oh, I'm a software developer, to, oh, I'm a front end React developer, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
hyper specializing people. It's making it harder for companies to find the right people to do what they need, or companies become dependent on very specific technologies
Mm,
because those are the technologies that they just because the first person they hired only knew React, and so now they're a React shop, right? And so it just, to me, is headed in a direction where we're letting the technology lead the company, as opposed to the company's needs and the customers defining what technology should be used.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I mean, enhancement and other things that we talk about. Certainly, I mean, it's a very massive sort of a topic, and especially the frameworks that you touched upon. I mean, every framework has their own sort of pros and cons. Now, now within within your experience, I mean, how do you rate that? And like a skill from a skill development perspective, some companies are like React shops, some are Angular shops, but there are like general principles as well. So how do you see that happening within the realm of Candle as an offering?
Yeah. And so really what we're working on, the reason I'm picking on JavaScript a little bit is that the technology that we think is going to be extremely powerful in the future is WebAssembly. And I know you're
Mm-hmm.
a little bit familiar with WebAssembly. You spoke with Matt, I think, a few weeks ago. And, you know, we're also heavy believers that WebAssembly really has the potential to fundamentally shake up software development that currently exists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reason is that WebAssembly is a binary format, meaning that you can use existing languages, uh, you know, some front-end languages, back-end languages, and you can compile them all to WebAssembly components. And so, you know how I was saying that right now you have to know a certain framework to be able to be compatible. But you know, again, I'm trying to predict the future here, which I can't guarantee will be right. But just imagine a future where it doesn't really matter what language you wrote your component in. You just take your component, you compile it to a shared format, and anyone in your company who can also compile components in that format in their language of choice is now able to bring everyone's components together and run them
Mm-hmm.
seamlessly together to build your software application, right? And so now you could have somebody who is a self-described backend developer writing something that a component that happens to be able to be used on your front end or inside a mobile application. And this type of breakthrough, I think is really important, really needed when it comes to, you know, developer productivity and just companies being able to move much faster than they are right now with, you know, much fewer resources.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, within this tool set, I mean, because these days, I mean, we are hearing a lot about AI, machine learning, Chat GPT, Open AI, and all these things. So, so within your product roadmap, are you sort of also planning to incorporate AI-based tools or maybe some techniques or other things to enhance developer productivity? Because that's what you touched upon, that WebAssembly and other related technology usage is going to enhance the productivity as well.
That's absolutely, you know, we started working on this before ChatGPT came out, but I've been very closely following the AI space. And so this was several years ago, before LLMs became all of the hit, large language models. Uh, there was a study that I read about where, or a PhD paper where somebody suggested, hey, we can use AI, these generative GANs, generative adversarial networks, to neural networks to create silicon chips, right? And say,
Mm-hmm.
here's how the circuits should be defined on these chips. And the designs that the AI was able to produce uh, sometimes were better than what humans could produce, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
an AI could just sit there and iterate. And if you were able to give it a problem that was properly constrained, right, and say it must match, you know, it must fit on a 2x2 wafer, and it has to have this input and this output. And then the AI just kept iterating until it got to the right answer, right? So it was more of a brute force type mechanic. But at the end, let's just focus on the results. The result was it was successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I see it going. And what we're pushing for at Candle is that we see that if software can be broken down into these distinct, small, individual input and output components, then anyone, whether it's a human or AI, which I'm betting where it's headed, can be used to write these small components that have very clearly articulated inputs and outputs and purpose. And so what we're working on at Candle is we're building that framework to allow developers to build applications and not necessarily just write code. We think that writing code is something that over time, especially as AI gets more advanced than the current language models that we're using for, like with ChatGPT for programming, when we have a GAN type network that's able to generate the inputs and output, or the outputs based on certain inputs, right? Then the source code doesn't matter. You're probably not going to be able to understand the source code. The machine's probably not even going to use a human programming language like Python or Java. It'll probably have its own type of programming syntax that at the end of the day just gets compiled into a binary. And so this idea that source code matters, I think, is one of the first ideas that's going to be important to solve to embrace this future of AI-led development. And so where does that leave humans, right? Well, what that leaves humans to do is that we need to be able to define what the inputs and outputs are. We need to know what the constraints of our environment are, of our business, the needs of the business, and what the overall application looks like. And so I don't think that in the near future, machines will be able to replace that. And so with Candle, what we're developing is a framework that is based on stringing together a series of inputs and outputs. And these inputs and outputs, again, you can write them or you can have someone help you write them. Contractor now, AI later, right? And but the primary, we'll call it application composer, is responsible for knowing, here's the flow that I want. I want to use an HTTP REST-based interface as opposed to a gRPC interface. And all of that remains within the control of the software composer. And each module is written completely agnostic. So it doesn't know that it's running in HTTP, excuse me, an HTTP server or a gRPC server. It only knows that it needs to process an output for a certain input. And so with our technology and with our framework, that's exactly what we want to enable, is that a human is responsible for making a unique grouping of components into an application that meets their customers' needs. And the actual code is now no longer relevant. And so this idea that, oh, everything must be open source and, oh, I need to do a code review. No, you don't. Just run your binary.
Okay.
So, you know, Uber, right?
Yeah.
Now, think back when you were a kid and your parents were telling you the norms of society, right? You know, my mom always told me never get in a car with a stranger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And then Uber came, and now literally every day I have strangers come pick me up and take me somewhere.
And even if you take like an Uber pool or Uber Express pool, then you have strangers sitting with you inside the car besides the driver.
Exactly. And now take that same exact analogy and apply it to software development, right? And so right now we're trained, and all of our security teams are like, hey, we don't want to run any untrusted code in our environment because it could get hacked, right? And everyone just accepts that. That's the absolute truth, that yes, we must never run any code in our environment that we didn't write. And that is what I want to challenge. That's what Candle is all about, is I want you to run untrusted code, right? And we give you, you know, not just us, we didn't invent WebAssembly, but our framework, which heavily relies on WebAssembly and the additional security controls and architectural controls that we've added into our framework, what they give you is the ability to just run that binary. because
Mm-hmm.
the human inside your company is who fully dictates what resources that binary has access to. By
Mm-hmm.
default, it only has access to the inputs that you give it, and then will return an output. It can't make network calls. It can't make, disk calls. It can't read your environment variables. It can't do anything other than just respond to your input and output. And that's really what's going to make that difference and help us move forward.
So in a nutshell, I mean, what we are really doing is defining the protocol and maybe like how the handshaking will happen. And then on the base of that, we are going to sort of have some convention in place through which all of this jazz happens.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that you also have to know how to tie in components together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so,
For
you
sure.
have to say, oh, okay, first my login flow needs to happen, and then is my flow for viewing accounts, right? And defining, well, here's what my database structure looks like. I'm an AWS shop. I'm an Azure shop. So all of those environmental concerns, right? Are you using a Postgres database or a MySQL database? All of these are
Sure.
completely hidden away from the components themselves. All of that is written in a configuration-like syntax. And so you simply expose to each component, here's a store record function, and the components will call back a store record function. They have no idea that it's
Mm-hmm.
actually making a call to Kafka or MySQL or Postgres, or writing a local file to disk. It doesn't matter to the function. All that matters is the function's able to store a record. And so with that level of control, the function is not able to do anything that's unexpected and can be fully unit tested to make sure that it
Mm-hmm.
never tries to do anything strange, and is only able to do what you expect it to do.
So you touched on this already, but just wanted to know your thoughts in a bit more concrete way. Do you think that in the future AI is going to replace the developers? Because that is what we have been, I mean, listening since our childhood, that there will be one day when humans will just think and the code will be written. That's one piece. And the second
Mhm.
piece is, and no one has to think about anything, the code will be there already. So
Yeah.
so what are your thoughts on that?
I think that over the next, the over our lifetime, really, like in the very near future, the art of writing code is going to be something that's going to get reduced to just hobbies, right? That for practical purposes, you will just have a machine to write code for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do programmatic actions that are custom to your needs, right? I won't even call it writing code. It's just going to give you binaries to run. That much I think is true. I don't believe that uh, that AI will completely replace the need for people who understand how to describe and know the constraints and the needs of their company. And so this is all work that right now is more in the realms of a senior developer and architect type person who really understands, like, okay, I need to make an application that is globally distributed, and I want to have data that gets replicated in X amount of time across the world so anyone can see it. And how all of the other technologies that exist right now, the different storage technologies, different eventing technologies, that level of understanding, I don't know if a machine will be able to do. Where
Mm-hmm. All right.
you can take these specific uh, tools that exist in the market and
Mm-hmm.
create what your business needs. I think that if you go and tell AI, hey, make me a Twitter clone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll give you the Twitter clone, but
Okay. Okay.
not the scale that Twitter has.
All right. All right. Okay. So, I mean, moving forward, where you see, I mean, this developer, developer enhancement or web assemblies, or maybe the future of work in regards to AI going?
Yeah. Um, so I think that AI is going to help companies. Um, I don't know how much it's going to help individuals per se, right? And so the reason I say that is that, you know, a company is going to use AI to help their developers right now just write their software faster, right? But realistically, what that means is that the company is going to need less software developers because they need less people writing code. And so that's why what we're working on is a way to really put in that human element to say, no, like a human is needed to uh, to constrain the inputs and output needs for each of the AI functions, right? The human's still going to always be needed to write the test cases to say that this function is correct or not correct. And so what the first step, again, this is a long journey. I'm not saying this is coming tomorrow, but I am saying that this is coming in the next probably decade or so, is that what humans need to be good at is instead of just being given requirements and executing on those requirements, is understanding how can I break these requirements down into each individual units of work, describe those units of work so that a machine can use it, and then validate the outputs of each of those units of work to make sure that the machine produced what I expected it to produce. And so
Sure.
the language and the framework to describe each function, to describe the connectivity between functions, and the framework to test these functions, that's what we're working on at Candle, and that's what we think that
Mm-hmm.
people will need to be experts at in the coming years so that they can effectively you know, accelerate their entire software development flow.
Yeah. So in the end, I mean, the last question really is that maybe like a message and to all the developers listening out there. I mean, do they have to be threatful about AI getting in place, or what do you think like the future of development looks like from an AI standpoint, or I mean, how developers can further adapt these techniques governed by AI to enhance their productivity and keep themselves going?
Yeah. And so again, I think here is where some of the best practices in software development are really you know, when we talk internally, it's really just we're just advocating for best practices, right? So if somebody is comfortable in best practices now, we believe that they will be perfectly capable and a hot commodity in a future where AI writes the code, because again, it's about test-driven development, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, for sure.
And if you can write the unit tests, then it doesn't matter anymore who writes the code, right? Because your tests must pass before the code gets there. If you can write your application data flow, if you can explain
Mm-hmm,
the data flow of your application, that's what matters, not actually integrating that data
mm-hmm.
flow, right? Like that's the part that's going away, but understanding how applications work and how
That
they
will still be
scale,
there.
that's going to absolutely be there. And so really this is a chance for software developers now to really come up from being code writers to truly being application composers.
Sure, sure. All right, all right. So yeah, so Fawad, in the end, I would like to really thank you for spending time with us today. And it was really a very insightful session. And I hope to host you again sometime in the near future with another exciting topic and pick up your brains about that particular thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, for anyone listening, if you want to just check out candle.dev, DEV, and you can learn more about what me and my team are working on. And thank you for hosting me. This was great being here.
Thanks, Fawad, and looking forward to having you again on Better Tech soon.
All right.
Bye.